to the Wisconsin Public Service Commission's Digital Opportunity Mini Conference. And thank you for joining the PSC and the many digital equity and inclusion practitioners from across the state. I'm Milena Bernardinello. I'm the Universal Service Fund and Digital Opportunity Director here at the PSC. And with me, there is our Bureau Director and a PSC team of 5 policy analysts supporting this event in different capacities. Before we fully start the event, we have a few housekeeping to make this a pleasing and smooth event. Please mute your microphone. The mini conference will be recorded and shared after the event with the related slide deck. So you all are gonna receive both. Each panel section is set for 55 minutes, including time at the end for a question and answer. And at that point, you can unmute your microphone. The panelists will have their camera on for the whole duration of the session, so you can really see the conversation running. There will be 3 breaks of 5 minutes each in between sections. And with this clarified, we can start to talk about Let's Go oriented on the plan for the day. The aim of the one-day mini conference is to share, connect, and learn about best practices in digital equity work, grant writing, and some key aspects of the digital equity grant. The event will focus on how the digital equity community can implement the Wisconsin Digital Equity Plan and bridge the digital divide for all the Wisconsinites. First, we will have 20 minutes with our keynote speaker. Then we will have 3 55-minute panel discussion sessions, which will be facilitated by PS staff. For each session, we aim to provide to you all the best practice of how to and lesson learned shared by our panelists. And lastly, we will have less than 10 minutes closing note with our Bureau Director. So without further ado, I will introduce you to our fabulous keynote speaker. We are very honored to have with us Regina, notoriously called Gina, D. Cooper Benjamin. Gina is the Deputy Director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, noticed as NDIA, and she shared a deep commitment to bringing human-centered approaches to solving our toughest problem using technology and data for social goods. She has 20 years of experience working in under-resourced community, and she's passionate about introducing youth and teenage girls, particularly, to coding. She has a master in public policy, graduating from Wellesley College as a Davis Scholar, and she has a certificate in nonprofit management and leadership. Gina will share with us more about the digital divide and the work that she and her colleagues do toward digital equity at the national level.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. I think my computer is a little delayed, so I apologize in advance. I have shut everything off to try and speed it up. So good afternoon, Wisconsin. Thank you to Alyssa, Damar, Josie, Melina, the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin, and the Digital Inclusion Community of Miss Wisconsin for having me here today and for hosting today's Digital Opportunity event. PSC is a trailblazer of digital opportunity across the country. Wisconsin Public Service Commission is one of only 2 state utility regulators that provide grants for digital inclusion work. As leaders in digital opportunity, it's an honor to be asked by PSC to provide opening remarks. Being in community with others is where I find the most comfort. So thank you for trusting me and welcoming me here with you. Collaboration and community are the keystones to addressing the hardest problems that we face, including the digital divide. Events like this that bring us together across municipalities, Native entities, state agencies, school districts, the UW system, workforce development agencies, nonprofit organizations, and the private sector are paramount to collective impact. All of us here today working together is how we advance digital opportunity. Today's event emphasizes the importance of spaces that promote knowledge sharing and grant writing, digital navigators, and coalition building for sustainable solutions to the digital divide, job creation, and economic growth. My name is Gina Cooper Benjamin, and I'm the Deputy Director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, or NDIA. I've always seen myself as a technologist at the intersection of tech and social good. I love tinkering with technology, data, and data systems. I discovered this love as I worked on education gaps. I built complicated algorithms in Excel for more efficient reporting to the federal government. Then, when I worked on housing gaps, I loved working on systems. And I also found myself wanting to connect youth experiencing homelessness to coding programs and other tech opportunities that would enhance their job skills. One day, I was looking for some resources that I could use for digital skills training, and I came across this amazing organization, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and joined the listserv. In 2021, they posted a role for deputy director, and I thought, this is it. This is the perfect opportunity, so I applied. Not only did I discover the resources that I needed through NDIA, I found a new job. While leaving my previous role was difficult, there was never a hesitance to join the NDIA team. I came to NDIA for the mission. NDIA advances digital equity by supporting community programs and equipping policymakers to act. We provide spaces and opportunities for our community of over 2,000 affiliates to come together for education, learning, fellowship, and fun. We listen and we learn from our affiliates, then we create publicly available tools and resources. Nothing is ever behind a paywall for anyone to discover and use. We just ask that you credit us. On the other side of that, we talk to policymakers and share what's happening in communities. In fact, our work with policymakers served as one of the driving forces behind the Digital Equity Act. So that $2.7 billion in the Digital Equity Act, it's the largest investment in digital inclusion to date. DEA is the most active, systemic approach to closing the digital divide in US history. We work with practitioners and policymakers because we believe that everyone should be able to safely navigate the digital world in the way that is most meaningful for them. To this end, we educate and provide tools and resources on low-cost internet, strong device ecosystems with low-cost options, digital skills training, and technical support. Essentially, we talk a lot about technology and digital access while centering humans and human experiences in the process. We work to expand digital opportunity and impact the lives of all community members, whether you're in Milwaukee County, Menominee County, or Vilas County. Sorry, y'all. I am from Boston, so my pronunciations might be off on a few of the things, but I think you'll get where I'm going with this. So I'd like to start the day by celebrating local bright spots across the state. Today, I'd like for us to celebrate the city of Racine for turning their Smart City initiative into a digital inclusion initiative. That's digital navigation programming and device distribution with ARPA funds. This demonstrates the power that federal commitments can have on our communities. I'd like to celebrate Wisconsin's Chippewa Valley partnership with the United Way of the Greater Chippewa Valley to form the Chippewa Valley Digital Inclusion Partnership, or CHIPDIP. That is a very cute name, by the way. I love it. CHIPDIP serves as a regional coalitions model and gathers practitioners, advocates, and allies from across the region. We're celebrating Door County, who aligned digital equity needs with broadband access planning. They serve as an exemplar in connecting community organizations across sectors to assess, plan, and alleviate digital needs within a community. We're also celebrating the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension, who began convening a digital navigator network in late 2024. Okay, so I know that we're all virtual. I said we're celebrating. I really like when people celebrate. I want to see y'all clap. I want to see you put yes, yes, Alyssa, that's what I'm talking about. Thank you all. So it's okay to celebrate ourselves. Okay. As much as we're here to celebrate bright spots, we're also here to ideate and share solutions for some of our toughest challenges and roadblocks. We're here to discuss sustainable funding and funding sources, to raise awareness and support, and to address disparate digital inclusion ecosystems. While these challenges may seem insurmountable in this moment, I think that I have some ideas for you, and I know that there will be amazing ideas that arise throughout the afternoon. According to the American Community Survey data, 26% of Wisconsinites do not have home broadband. This is not just simply a poles and wires issue. Yes, that's part of it, The other part of it is this work that NDIA and affiliates across the country are doing to support internet adoption. One of the biggest factors for adoption is affordability. Mothers, fathers, caregivers should not have to make a decision between paying their internet bill and paying for groceries or other essential utilities. To help, NDIA regularly reviews the sea of internet plans out there. We created a low-cost internet rating system that we call NDIA Grading Internet for Good, or GIG. We designed GIG to evaluate the quality and affordability of low-cost plans. Through GIG, we assess 7 criteria areas, including cost. We don't think that anything above $30 a month is considered low cost. And eliminating barriers for those who qualify. So no contracts, no termination fees, and most importantly, no credit checks. How many of you have heard, I don't need the internet as a reason for the reason that a community member is not online? Probably most of you. This response is rooted in fear. Fear and insecurity are other big factors when it comes to adoption. NDIA affiliates, some online with us, run programs that include internet safety skills, which build confidence between the beneficiaries of our work, like elders and teens, and the technology they use for civic, social, and economic participation. Sorry about my camera. I turned it off. Additionally, NDIA has an honor roll of low-cost internet plans for anyone interested in learning about low-cost internet offers. Through the honor roll, we score all of the discounted broadband plans that internet service providers offer. Honor roll can help digital inclusion practitioners navigate and understand what options are available from a range of ISPs. We've created both gig and honor roll because affordable internet options lead to more consistent connectivity to service. Are you all ready for another statistic? Okay. According to American Community Survey data, 20% of Wisconsinites do not have a desktop or laptop at home. Those likely to not have the devices that they need to work, go to school, and schedule appointments are those who can't afford them. Those with disabilities who need assistive technology to operate computers. Those who have fears about breaking a computer or a computer system. Those who need them most. Luckily, there are national organizations like Digitunity, an NDIA affiliate who does systemic level work to address barriers to computer ownership. They focus on policies and practices to engage local catalysts. There are other national programs like Easter Seals, another NDIA community member. Some of their affiliates set up assistive technology resource systems centers with low and high-tech solutions to help people live more independently and achieve their goals. And in communities across the country, including yours, there are local refurbishers offering affordable solutions to computer ownership. And a fact sheet produced by NDIA, ILSR, and AARP, we encourage state and local governments, as well as nonprofit and philanthropic organizations, to create programs to distribute devices to those who need them. Our communities need affordable, sustainable computer ecosystems to mitigate the device barrier that prevent them from accessing school resources, scheduling appointments, looking for jobs online, and participating in e-commerce, where retail sales happen in the modern digital world, fuel a significant portion of spending, which helps stimulate and grow the economy. Okay, I have one more statistic for you, then I'm done with stats for the day. According to the National Skills Coalition, 92% of US jobs require digital skills. That's based on data and science. I like to say that 100% of jobs require digital skills because I haven't found a job yet that doesn't require some level of digital skill knowledge. Some of the industries requiring skills include manufacturing, retail, healthcare, food services, construction, and agriculture. Many NDIA affiliates focus on foundational skills ranging from Microsoft Office to data entry to point of sale skills. Some, and I encourage this of all, are starting to integrate AI in their digital skills training. They're educating community members on the basics of AI, its pervasiveness in our day-to-day lives, its inherent biases, its challenges, and the practical uses in which we can gain benefits. When thinking about digital skills, it's important to focus on what's in front of us, and as technology evolves, it's important to think towards the future too. The evolution of technology is a factor in why the digital divide exists and will persist. We need strong investment in skills training. Public, private, nonprofit partnerships, and strong digital skills programs that prepare our workforce, including youth, for the jobs of today and the future. A key NDIA resource is our Digital Inclusion Program Manual and listserv, where you'll find an abundance of tools and resources. When it comes to navigating solutions for connectivity, devices, and skills, digital navigators are one of the greatest resources for our communities. We need to replicate programs and partnerships like Forest County, an NDIA National Digital Navigator Corps member who, with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Extension, was able to hire a digital navigator and effectively serve hundreds of residents, providing skills training, technical troubleshooting, cybersecurity training, and device distribution. Forest County's digital navigation program shows the ubiquitous need for directed digital inclusion activities. Digital navigators have been around for a long time, a very long time, and we've been iterating on the model since its inception. These trusted guides who assist community members with ongoing individualized support have existed in libraries for as long as I can remember. I can remember in high school taking my summer reading list to my local library branch, Fields Corner in Boston. I can remember the care with which my librarian insisted that I move away from the card catalog system and move towards the new digitized system of finding books. I can remember the library making me sit down at the computer and learn Mavis Beacon teaches typing, aging myself a bit with that one, before heading off to college. This is a role that libraries play in communities. This is what libraries mean to people like me. Libraries are key partners in the execution of many successful digital inclusion and digital navigator programs. Unfortunately, the current assault on the Institute of Museum and Library Services will impact the delivery of digital inclusion services for millions. Small and rural libraries with limited local funding will feel the loss of their IMLS grants the hardest. We must protect and preserve our libraries and ensure that our communities do not lose the critical programs that these anchors provide. That's education programming, essential early childhood programming, and digital inclusion programming. Beyond libraries, since 2020, the Digital Navigator model has spread across communities in different modes. Some NDIA affiliates set up digital navigators in healthcare settings. One member of NDIA's National Digital Navigator Corps is an Iraq War veteran in rural Texas. He drives hours between clients to deliver digital navigation services to military families. Another NDIA community member, Shaping Our Appalachian Region, a nonprofit dedicated to rebuilding economically distressed communities in Eastern Kentucky. They meet community members where they are, including the local community college. Digital navigators are important across all communities. For those of you who want to get more involved and to plug in all of our work, I can't underscore the importance of coalitions enough. You can find fellow allies, those with shared goals, and people you can trust within your local digital inclusion coalitions. NDIA tracks digital inclusion coalitions across the country. In fact, we have a cool new map, which you'll find on our resource sheet. In fact, I've mentioned some coalitions, new coalition formations, who are part of today's event. Please visit NDIA's coalition page and review our coalitions guidebook. You don't have to start big, but you should start. Some starts look like a round table that focuses on planning to set a solid foundation before they flourish and grow into a full coalition. The work that we do for students taking online classes, parents connecting to their children's teachers and student portals, teaching seniors how to access their electronic health records and the cute photos of their kids and grandkids, and enabling adults with disabilities to participate more fully in their communities is very important. Digital access helps the unhoused find a food bank or emergency housing needs, or even artists and museums to curate digital experiences or spaces of joy for all to experience. Digital access is about the teen who dropped out of school and is ready to complete their high school equivalency, the single parent who wants to better themselves and their family by attending community college, the veteran who wants to connect with other veterans for support and learn digital skills to acquire a job, the farmer who needs to figure out an issue with a crop or wants to learn more about agritech. In the case of a natural disaster or weather emergency, identifying safe solutions, and to help new businesses establish an LLC. I could keep going, but I think that y'all get it. We need to think beyond the digital needs of today and think towards the future. What's at risk if we don't? As technology evolves, we run the risk of having digital gaps so broad that they can be catastrophic. This is why the funding and the Digital Equity Act is so important. The federal investment of the moment codified in law and the Digital Equity Act, will set us up to work for workforce and economic success in the future. Through DEA and Wisconsin, $23 million of capacity and competitive grants would support 81% of the state's covered populations. I have some news though, and it's not very good. This is all at risk. None of the funding in the Digital Equity Act is safe for any of us. Here are some possibilities for what you can do. Identify your elected officials and educate them. Your policymakers need to hear from you to understand what you do, why it matters, and why the DEA is essential for enabling all of our work. You can also encourage your policymakers to reach out to NTIA and NIST about the funding to ensure it's implemented. The NTIA webpage has a suite of tools to help you. Template letters, scripts, state and territory one-pagers, talking points, and a breakdown of the funding for each state and what's at risk. Think about some of the very specific examples I've given today. Rural communities need tech for crop analysis, surveying lands, and other farming efficiencies. Urban communities need youth skill training, including AI skills to prepare the workforce of the future. We all need a workforce equipped with skills to build a globally competitive economy. If you're having difficulties right now, if it's feeling a little heavy, we're all feeling the weight of the moment. You are not alone. The challenges that we're facing around funding and connectivity are not new. Think back 5 years. Where were we? The pandemic. At the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't have the support of the federal government. Communities came up with solutions and used federal stimulus funds to further that work. In times of crisis, communities work together to get things done. If you're having a hard time trying to figure out where to start or who to turn to, join the NDIA community of affiliates, www.digitalinclusion.org/join. Come to NDIA's annual conference, Net Inclusion, May 20th through 22nd in Gila River Indian Community in Arizona. You can join other thought leaders like yourselves to discuss important conversation topics like data and evaluation, research, incarcerated individuals, digital navigators, digital skills, aging individuals, coalitions, barriers to connectivity, AI, health systems, school systems, and multilingual learners, and so much more. You have the power to enact change. Forward together. Thank you for having me, and thank you to the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin for organizing an amazing afternoon. I look forward to connecting with many of you in the future. Thank you.
So thanks again, Milena and Gina, for setting us up with some valuable context for the next session. And thanks for joining us, everyone, for the session on grant writing. We want to keep this interactive and useful for you all. So feel free to use the chat function to keep track of your questions, and we'll do our best to address them at the end or as applicable, perhaps in the midst of the panel session. My name is Troy Hoppenjohn, and I'm a grant specialist on the Public Service Commission team. I work closely with the Digital Opportunity team on the digital equity initiatives. I'll be facilitating our first panel discussion of the day on grant writing tips with an experienced panel of grant writers who we hope will be able to help demystify this process a bit by sharing their knowledge and expertise. Let me see if I can get this slide to advance there. There we go. Excuse me. Our panel includes the following guests who volunteered to share their knowledge and experience writing grants for a wide array of public and private donors. Doris Wessels is the United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha Counties grant writer and applies to a wide array of grants. Doris is like several of our own PSC team members in that she's involved with community radio as an announcer. Charles Pelicane is a nationally recognized expert in digital opportunity and joins us today from Human IT based in California. He has a proven track record of driving significant growth and innovation over 6 years with that organization. By creating impactful coalitions and designing programs, he's transformed communities across North America through technology, internet access, and training to many underserved populations. Sarah Lorenz joins us as well from the private sector today as Manager of Strategic Partnerships with Bertram Communications, specializing in fiber projects. She works on grant funding and community engagement, compliance, reporting, and overall grant management. She also supports project management for Bertram's fiber initiatives. I'm going to attempt to bring down my slides here and highlight our panel members for you all. It looks like somebody's already done that for me, so thanks to whoever did that. Fabulous. This is going smoother perhaps than our last webinar that we conducted, which is great. So thanks to you all. I warmly welcome you to the stage as I pull up the first question of the day. That is, what are the most important early steps that you all take before drafting a proposal? And how do you set up your team for success in pulling together such a proposal? Uh, Anybody can, feel free to contribute, but I think we might go to Charles first for his expertise on this. Charles, how you doing?
Doing well. Everyone can hear me all right?
Great, coming through loud and clear.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to be speaking with you all today. And although I am currently sitting in Southern California, I've spent a lot of time in Wisconsin. I actually grew up in the Wausau, Wisconsin area. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison and spent a lot of time in Milwaukee as well. So I've spent more than 20 years in Wisconsin that I'm very fond of, and a lot of family still there as well. But when I think about those important early steps before even drafting the proposal and how to set the team up for success, I really think that there's just a few key activities there, right? First of all, understanding the NOFO itself. And, there's a few pieces to that, right? Thinking about eligibility, two pieces even within there, right? Are you an eligible applicant and are you looking to submit eligible activities? And when we look at the applicant area, I think about is our organization the type of organization that's listed on there? And if not, do we know a group that is, right? Like if a grant is calling for a certain amount of years of experience and maybe we don't have that, can we find someone who does? And even if our organization is listed on there as an eligible applicant, say as a 501(c)(3), is there someone maybe who's better suited that maybe, hey, yeah, we're an eligible applicant, but the way that this is designed may be better for a local government or a research institution or something like that. And so there's really those two pieces there when I think about us as an applicant. Are we on there? And even if we're on there, is there someone who's better suited? And then when we look at the activities, as far as those eligible activities, first of all, is this in line with our mission? Is this what we are here to do, right? And if the answer is no, then that's pretty easy to pass on that application. But if it is something that's in line with our mission, just asking, is this the right thing for us to do right now? Are these the activities that we want to be prioritizing at the current moment? Which brings us a little bit into the evaluation criteria as well, right? When we're understanding the NOFO, thinking about, well, what are they going to be evaluating this project based on? What is most important to the organization that has put out this NOFO? Where is their priorities? And are those priorities something that we want to be focused on? And when we look at how they're scoring the particular RFP, well, what areas should we focus on? For instance, if letters of support or something like that is only 5 out of 100 points and the project plan is 45 points, well, we probably want to spend the bulk of our time on the project plan, and those letters of support can come later. And then when we look at that evaluation criteria and we look at what's really important to the organization that's put out that NOFO, can we win? Are we actually strong enough to win? And if we're not strong enough, maybe in certain areas, do we find a sub-applicant in those areas to help us out? Should we maybe become a sub-applicant, right, and find a better lead applicant based on those evaluation criteria? And so when we think about aligning with the NTIA priorities in regards to the NOFO, if that scope that we've put together isn't mission clear, obvious, and direct, that's going to be a challenge. And we want to make sure that a lot of their priorities, whether that's the NTIA's priorities or whoever's put out the RFP, is actually being repeated back in the scope and making that very easy for them to see. And so, when we think about those early steps, really understanding the NOFO is so critical. But then we want to get organized too, right? We want to build a capable grant team, and we've got to think about, who do we want to work with there? Who uh, on our grant team, who is going to work with partners? Who's going to do the grant writing? Who's going to handle budgets? Who's handling registrations? Is someone trying to Superman this and it's just one person that's trying to do it all themselves? Or do we have that team that's going to be strong in each of those areas so that we can put together a strong proposal? And do we have to identify some strong partners there? Who already maybe does work in this area? Who does it great? And who does this RFP really seem designed for? When you read it, does someone already come in mind? And you're like, oh, maybe we should try to work with them and see where we fit in. Or if we're going it ourselves, really thinking, how can we how can we get someone else to fill in there? And then with the registrations, do you have someone who can handle it? Do you have someone that can do it? The timelines can be pretty long. And so making sure you start that early can be one of those common pitfalls as far as not setting yourself up for success. So, I'll just kind of wrap up with, when you look at that NOFO, is it something you want to be doing? Is it something that they're looking for? Don't just force what you want to be doing at the expense of what the group is actually prioritizing, and to leave your ego at the door, whether that's finding sub-applicants or being a sub-applicant, to set yourself up for success. So those are some of the things that we look at.
Yeah, great, Charles. Yeah, some of the things I heard there, NOFO, eligibility, prepping. Sarah, Doris, any responses? Just sort of keeping in mind that we have about 5 minutes per question yeah, I think we're doing okay, but feel free to respond to any of that.
Sure, I can add on a little bit to what Charles was saying. Um, I agree with everything he said. And with the NOFO, even though I try to be a pretty environmentally conscious person, I will print it out and I will go through it to force myself to read every single line of it. I highlight things, and it is also helpful then for discussion within the team. As far as setting up the team for success, whether internally or externally, I like to make up a timeline. So I will have one document that's kind of the hub for everything. And then from that, be able to assign out tasks like, I'm going to want you to write the narrative for section 11, and I'm going to need finance to do whatever, and setting internal deadlines for everything along the way so that you can complete it all in time.
Thanks, Doris. Yeah, some really great points. It's always important to be able to interact with the document. Yeah, having a physical copy is helpful. Sarah?
I agree with everything, Charles. I think that you had great. The biggest thing I took away from all of this with my stuff is you have to put your ego aside to find that a notice of funding for something might not be best written as you as the grant holder, but as a sub grant, and that you successfully helping somebody else write that grant because you have that part of the knowledge to be able to do that, to have a successful grant, seems to be the magic in this industry, because you get a lot of people that can write grants, but if they don't want to work with other people, they want to stay in their box, it won't ever work together as a team. And then to go off of Doris, I send calendar invites to teams saying this is when this is due, this is when this is due. And after I've read through that NOFO and come up with my timeline, I then put in calendar requests to the teams so that everybody knows when everything's due. And I give a little bit of a buffer. So I never really tell the team what the exact date of when the submission is, because I never want to submit on that last day. So that's my secret of that one.
Planning ahead. Good,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, absolutely. Having Gantt charts and that sort of thing, RACI matrices, that sort of thing always comes in handy. Who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, who's informed, all of that. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. So yeah, fabulous response. We'll maybe move on to the next question, which is sort of more in the project design realm. So feel free to take a stab at this, Sarah, if you like. What strategies do you use to turn a great idea into a fundable narrative? This is sort of oriented toward that design project process and designing a solution. How do you do that, especially when addressing questions of equity and community needs? And just on, while I'm saying the word equity, I did drop the instructions for a digital equity capacity grant into the chat box, which sort of addresses some of those questions that Charles spoke of in his first answer. So yeah, what sort of strategies do you use, especially in the design of programs that address equity and community needs?
Is this one me? I thought I was number three.
Yeah, go ahead. Doris
Oh,
is
this one
taking a
was for
pass
Doris.
on this, and she wants to react to what you have to say. But Charles, you can, if you don't feel comfortable with her, I bet
I can
Charles can
totally
jump
do
in.
it, but I'm normally like, I'm going to start out with I come prepared. So I'm going to sit down and I'm going to look at what that is and what it's required for the, that notice of funding. I'm going to refer to it probably just about every answer I give is the Bible. That's what I call it. And everything's specific and everyone's different. And there is no cookie cutter NOFO I've ever seen in my life. That's the same. I don't care if it's the same entity doing the grant funding. It's not, they're never the same. So I first would very much find the definition of what their equity and everything is considered. And then I'm going to do my research. I'm going to look at my historical data and my research. And I'm going to say, okay, like what's budget friendly, what are must haves, what are nice to haves. And I'm going to wrap that in sustainability because all those things in the NOFO are going to go back to how I even research that before I even start my narrative. Because without all of that, I'm going to rewrite my narrative so many times that I'm going to lose focus. So I want to do my research first before I start that narrative. Um, and then I'm going to reach out to communities. I think most of us that do grant writing in areas or specifics, I submerge myself in the communities, right? I find out what they're about. I interact with them. I attend things, and because that's where you need to be. Like you need to know what their needs are. I can guess what their needs are, but I really want to hear from them what their needs are and see what their needs are because that helps you write from the heart. And I think that that's part of the success of some people with their grant writing is that if you can put heart into your narrative, it tells a story. And that story is what sets you aside from other people. And then obviously adding all the budget and all the other friendly stuff and hitting those points, like Charles said before, are all good things, but I think every narrative has a good heart in it. And when they don't let you do heart, I that's where I stumble a little bit because I'm good at putting that heart in there and doing the research, but sometimes for me stats are a little boring. I can write them, but I want to write a story about those stats too. Does that
You
make sense?
absolutely, yeah. And
So
you
I
did bring up,
outline it. I start with all my research first. I do, but that notice of funding, I refer back. I dog ear the pages. I highlight. I don't save a tree. I'm going to be honest. I try to, but that's how I do it, and I carry it everywhere. I put it in a binder, and I refer to it. My answer to is look in the NOFO before you answer that question.
and you bring up an important point that some of what you said speak to the question of trust with target populations and developing relationships with them. And I'll just sort of, use that opportunity to highlight the fact that on page 19 of our application instructions, which was the first link that I dropped in the chat there, on page 19, that trust of the community is among the merit and evaluation criteria that are used for the assessment of these digital equity capacity grants. Charles or Doris, anything to add on that in terms of prepping for the program design?
Sure, I can chime in. It is interesting because we have these separate questions, but they're all so intertwined. So speaking to, like program design or project design, like it goes back to what Charles talked about in the beginning, like, are you even the right people to be doing this? Um, and making sure you're not just like chasing some sort of money because it's there, that you're the right people to do it, then I feel like it's easy to then design the program with hopefully the experts you already have on staff in this area, leaning on your impact managers or program managers if you're fortunate enough to have them to help put something together.
Great, thanks, Doris. Yeah, good points. Charles?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what's been said thus far. I'll just add on to it. One of the strategies that I like to use when designing that program is kind of breaking down each plank of the program into a separate kind of item, putting that next to the priorities of the program, and seeing how many we can tie across, right? And ideally, the more priorities can tie to each plank of the program, then we know the stronger it's going to be. But if we've got planks of our program that don't tie to any priorities, well, that already identifies a huge problem for us. Or if it's just loosely tied and there's only maybe like one tie here, one tie there, then we know that there's going to be an issue as far as making sure that it's really aligned with what the group is looking for. And are we repeating back that language and that intention in even the program design? And I will just say, sometimes it's easier than others. Some RFPs, right, are more prescriptive than others, right? And they've got a very clear program that they're looking to do, and you can pretty much just repeat it back. And then some programs, like this one, for instance, has some pretty clear tracks to it, but does have some flexibility there. And it is up to the group to make sure that they're designing something that's in line with the intention. And you can't just repeat it back, but you've got to actually have some creativity and thought into what you're putting together and making sure it's aligned there.
Yeah, some great points. Some of what think I heard across all of what you were saying, the three of you, was, sort of looking at your mission statement as an organization and sort of boiling the problem down as it's been, sort of outlined in the notice of funding opportunity to a cogent problem statement, and then building your program and design so that it addresses that particular problem with a solution that can be easily understandable by the reviewers. So great answers, everybody. Thank you very much. So the last main big question that I think we want to cover for the participants, who, again, thank you all for joining us today. What tips do you guys have for balancing ambition and realism in the budget specifically, but then also ensuring that nothing gets missed through the budgeting process all the way up to that submission date that I think you also talked about very well, Sarah? Go ahead, and if you want to jump, yeah, you seem like you're ready for this one.
So I take a look. That's where I kind of do with Charles, like I did, is I write down all the budget items. First, I go back to that NOFO and look for those definitions. Every grant's a little different. The nice thing is the PST spells them out and gives those definitions, so you don't have to wonder what it means. But those budgeting, so I break down each item and I look at it and I go back to those words must have or would be nice. And then I tie it into the formula of sustainability. And then I look at what Charles says. It is like, so the points value on that to make that budget item be a must have or a nice to have. And we weigh that out. And then, so I put that out first. And then I bring the financial team in, because let's be real, they're the ones that have to make sure that sustainability and budget for business, if we get the grant, makes the most sense, right? So then I have that and I present it to them and I say, listen, this is what I want to do. How real is it? And how sustainable is it? And scoring wise on a grant, is it even going to get us where we need to be? Or what do I have to do different? And sometimes it takes a couple tries for us to go back and forth. But most of the time, that must have and nice to have, instead of like pros and cons, that's how I write my columns in my budget and bring it to my financial team, who then looks at me and says, "You're crazy, Sarah. This isn't going to work." And then the reality is, if I can only get 50 points and it's a competitive grant out of 100, I need to go back to the drawing board, or I need to scrap this grant, because that's a lot of work for a middle of the road kind of grant, right? Application. So my budget comes down to back and forth, but it's the must have column and the nice to have and sustainability. And if those three are the formula, that's how I come up with what we put in each budget category. And then you got to make sure you cover all your permitting and your surprises. And sometimes the NOFO say you can have your indirect costs like traveling or your meetings. You got to pay attention to what start date you can start incurring expenses that you can be reimbursed for. a lot of people are like, "Hey, I bought materials, last year for a project we never used them. I'm going to save money on this grant, but I'm going to put them in there because I already paid for them." You really got to pay attention to your notice of funding for those budget items, because sometimes those aren't reimbursable items. You got to watch those when you're doing those budgeting items on what your your threshold is for reimbursing. You're matching funds. That's another thing I go back to the notice of funding. In kind, cash. I have learned more in my 5 years of grant writing than I ever thought I would, that there are different levels of in kind and there are different levels of cash. And you really want to make sure before you go out and talk to a community and get those budgetaries to put into your grant, that you don't hook them up on something that isn't worth anything for a grant. And it was a nice gesture, but it didn't help you guys. And unfortunately, I've learned a hard lesson a few years ago, that you really have to pay attention to what the definition of in kind and cash are for each grant. They're not the same. But all those in together make that budget at the end of the day. If you could put some nice to haves in there because your matching works out great, then it's great. Otherwise, you go with your must haves.
That's
Did that
great.
help with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. You knocked it out of the park, especially on the budgeting part. How about yeah, if you or anybody else has anything to say about, those final days towards submission, what does your sort of revision and review process look like? How many cooks are in the kitchen? Anything to say about, yeah, the finalization part of the design and submission process?
I can answer, or someone else can. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'll start us off, and Sarah, if you want to fill in for me, with our organization, we have a few different approval levels that have to occur, and if we are working with another partner, they likely also have a few different approval levels. And what we found is really helpful is just bringing in those approvers as early in the process as possible, getting them aligned with the general scope and the general budget, so that they don't need to read that narrative or feel like they need to read that narrative word for word, and then having the time to mark that up. And we're getting into that level of detail, but really focusing on, hey, can we get the organization aligned on the scope and on the budget, and then the actual narrative, let's leave that to the experts, let's leave that to the grant writers themselves. And then that has helped reduce our kind of last few days a lot. And then we do actually calendar the submission time for the grant. So making sure there is that calendar time. We try to always do it a day or two before. We make sure that we can get in the systems right away, like once the grant gets out. So that's already solved for. We try to do it a day or two before. That doesn't always work out. Typically, we do have someone who's just responsible for that submission and getting all the attachments and dotting every I and crossing every T, is a different person who's maybe responsible for kind of bringing everyone to the table and getting things kicked off there.
Awesome.
Fabulous. Yeah.
We do a little bit of variation of that. Some of the things I do first is obviously you get in the portal or the application process, right? And you figure out what it is. My first year I was here, so almost 5 years ago, we did the CARES Act grant. And I'm going to be honest with you, we missed some applications because we waited until the last minute. And when we went to upload, it was after the 4:59 time and the whole system locked, right? And because we waited for so long, we lost out on 7 opportunities. And we learned a very valuable lesson 5 years ago, that you don't wait until 10 minutes beforehand to upload everything, even though it's all sitting there ready to go. Ideally, we like to do it one complete day beforehand, but we've done it as little as 12 hours before. But we have a team that comes in, like for these last round of grants that we had a team that entered everything in. And then we had another team that came in and double checked because there was a lot of numbers. And after you look at numbers for about an hour or two, they all look the same, and transposing can become very easy to do. So we had just a complete fresh set of eyes, maybe not even somebody on the financial team or anything, but just a fresh set of eyes, a whole new team that came in behind us and looked at that. So they weren't the same ones that entered it in. And that seemed to be successful for us. And so if it's a narrative grant, like Charles, we have a team that sits down and looks at that ahead of time so that at the end of the double checking, they don't have to read word for word and grammatical and anything like that. That's already been done weeks before the grant was due.
Fabulous.
I
You bring
just
up, yeah, go ahead, Doris.
I just want to echo the like never submit on the last day. I personally am very paranoid that like that's going to be the day I break an arm or that's going to be the day the internet goes out. So I always try to submit early. When I get to the point where I think I'm ready to submit, this is another time where I will print it out. I go through it just to catch any typos I may have had. And then the best practice would be to have somebody else read it. And I like to have somebody read it who maybe even isn't familiar with the program to make sure I'm conveying it clearly to somebody who is not so deep in it that you start to make assumptions that, oh, well, like you don't even consciously think about it, but you assume people understand what you're talking about. And this may all be brand new to them and you need to explain it in a clear manner.
Yeah, some fabulous points. Yeah, about the review process and especially familiarity with the platforms. I think I'm going to be a broken record in referencing the links that I included in the chat there, but the Wisconsin Digital Equity Capacity Grant link includes instructions for how to access, get a user ID and password for the two systems that PSC uses that you will need before you submit your application. And then of course you want to be looking at the format in which the application is submitted, which is on the grants management system for PSC. Do you guys have anything to say about sam.gov? I don't know if any of you are all familiar with that process, but I was a contractor for the federal government, and so was abundantly familiar with where that whole system is another step in the process. Any additional
Don't
remarks on
wait
that
until
or
the
anything
week
else?
before.
Right, exactly.
30 days because you're going to need
Yep,
it.
yep. They do
And don't
have
make
pretty
mistakes.
good they do have pretty good customer service if you reach out to them with enough time on your hands. But
Yes, there is, and the other thing is when you're setting it up, make sure you have the right person, making sure that it's renewed every year, and to make sure that whomever that is going to be the administrator of it for long term. Because to change your administrator, it's not. It's tedious. It's not difficult. It's just tedious. That's the best way to say that. So just make sure that 101, if you wait the week before the grant to do your sam.gov, you will never submit that grant. It will never happen. And there are different levels for sam.gov depending on what type of grants you're writing. I didn't know that at one point I had to be fingerprinted because I needed a level 2 clearance. And I did not know that, but I learned quickly that you need to do that for certain grants. So we just went as high as we could. And again, don't wait for a week before, otherwise you'll be just fine with sam.gov.
yeah, good points. So before we wrap it up and open up for broad questions from the group, what do you guys think of sustainability and how do you guys sort of think about that, plan for that, make sure that there's long-term viability beyond the grant period for the initiative that you're undertaking? Any words on that?
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about is there something that's going to continue on after this? Have we built a program that isn't going to require continuous funding? Are we maybe, for instance, training a group that already exists that will continue to exist after, and we're using the funding to bring their talent level to a place that this will continue there for a period of time thereafter the grant.
Yeah, great.
We were
And I
also
would,
looking, oops, sorry. Doris, you go ahead. Sorry.
sure. I think it'll really strengthen your application if you can show who else in the community is supporting this. I'm always focused on like monetary sustainability and just like, we have the support of XYZ Corporation, that's the biggest employer in town, and they're committed to this for the next 3 years, things like that can show um, you're not overly reliant on government funding for what you're doing.
I also take a look at for sustainability as far as like the hardware or the equipment that you're going to be, you're requesting funding for. Is this something that's going to last for the 2 years of the grant period and then, be out of warranty? And these poor people are, this program is left with crippling maintenance or upgrades or upkeeps. Looking at that as when you're going for that amount, what you're requesting. I'm not saying go with the highest priced item, but let's be reasonable with I'm not buying a 30-cent item that is going to be sustainable for a long time to this poor community. And then, how can the community sustain it? And can they sustain it after the grant is closed? And for how long can they sustain it? Those are open conversations I've had with a couple of the communities that I'm, assisting with this grant on. Is what happens afterwards? Like, how are you guys going to do it? Is it going to be 1 year and then it's done and all this it's going to sit here and collect dust? Like, what is your long-term outlook on this? And I just had very candid conversations with that, and so a couple people have backed out and said we can't, and maybe we shouldn't do that because we won't get the points for that. But I do have two communities that took that seriously and are really going to do that. So I think that's where sustainability and having that conversation is a good thing.
Fabulous points. Yeah. Obsolescence, quality of products, quality of platforms and technology, all totally relevant in this space. Any additional questions or any additional points that you guys would like to make before we sort of open it up to the group for questions? In that case, without further ado, we will call it Q&A time. I think you can still all hear me in spite of the fact that I'm now sharing my screen. I hope that worked. So yeah, questions from the group. Feel free to come off of mute, unmute yourselves if you can, if you have a question. Otherwise, you can drop them in the chat if we're in this space together. It's good to have collaborative learning.
Hey, Troy.
Hey, Damar.
We got a question in the chat. Excuse me. What kind of data would be useful to collect during the project period to advocate for supporting a long-term digital navigator position?
Well, I think to start with, because this, for this particular grant, this being the NTIA grant, and looking at covered populations, there's viewers where you can see at a county census tract level, state level, what the percent of covered populations are. And then in return, also that data, the census data has things as far as like, percent of people in that area who maybe don't have access to a computer or don't have broadband internet, because that's going to speak to, well, if this county has 30% of their people that don't currently have those things or whatever the case may be, that's going to advocate for that position. And again, it goes back, and also if there's a high covered population there, it's kind of a double hit. So it goes back to, okay, what is this funder looking for, and what kind of data can I use to demonstrate that? And for this particular grant, I definitely think it starts with, covered populations, and then that census data on, how folks are actually interacting with digital tools in that area.
Just as a follow-up question on that, do you guys ever collect your firsthand data? You spoke of, some of these secondary data sources and, sort of speaks to the desk review process, but do you ever sort of collect your own data? And if you have something to add to the previous question, go ahead, Doris.
Yeah, we do a lot of device distribution here, and we also have digital navigators. And it's interesting because like I had initially asked like, oh, are we doing like intake surveys and like tests afterwards? And there was a lot of resistance to that, like, whoa, like we don't want to put up more barriers. But we are doing like all that I really needed, which is just asking people, simple demographic info, and asking a few questions about their like previous computer skills. And then as they interact with the digital navigators know to try to gather anecdotes and also track, how many people are they helping? Like if you can show that there is demand for this, that's the way you're going to be able to get more funding for it.
Thanks, Doris. Next question, unless Sarah, anything to add?
Charles covered pretty much what I was going to say,
Sure,
besides,
sure.
location and then Doris added the rest of it. So I think it was really well covered.
Sure. So the next question I see in the chat is, if a group of schools in a region are interested in digital navigators, would you recommend each apply individually or have their CESA apply, including each of the schools wishing to participate? That might be a question directed at PSC. I'm not sure. Is that maybe? Damar, do you have any input on that? Still
I can
waiting for
definitely
you.
give my 2 cents.
Oh yeah, you go ahead,
As
Charles.
Damar is thinking about what input maybe the PSC wants to provide, and I'll stall for you for a moment there. But personally, I always think coalitions look stronger than individuals. Now, there is the alternative train of thought of like, hey, well, we'll apply for a bunch of them and maybe some will win and some won't. But ultimately, if it's all one project and you think you have a strong enough coalition, and a strong enough project, to me that looks better overall. Plus, I do also think empathetically sometimes as far as like what's it like to receive a 11 different proposals that are exactly the same and then having to score those against the others. That's also a little bit difficult for the group that's doing the scoring. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't know if that's an official answer, but definitely want other folks, Doris or Sarah, if you've got 2 cents, please chime in as well.
That's helpful. I'll just, before you guys jump in, I'll just highlight the fact that we do have a coalitions track for this particular grant agreement. And so I think it's important to underscore that there is a particular instrument in this particular grant application period for coalitions like that. Go ahead, Doris or Sarah, whatever you like.
I was just
So
going to say, going off of Charles a little bit, is I would have taken that coalition one step and maybe instead of saying, let's work together, what can we do to work together? Maybe it would even be better and more points value if, we did one digital navigator per 3 schools, something like that, and came up with a team effort like that. Maybe I would even dig deeper into that and see what you could do. Would it be because I think at the end of the day, 11 different applications, like you said, I think the PSC has a lot of undertaking with a lot of other things that they would probably appreciate that there's a story behind it, right? That I could build that story of making these communities with rural schools that need these digital navigators, but maybe don't have long-term sustainability to do one per school, which is what they want. That's a nice have, but maybe not a must have, where that they could share one for every 2 or 3 schools and present it that way.
I was going to add, Charles was talking about the like empathetic point of view, which Sarah also talked about too, but I would turn that on also a little bit of the selfish point of view and just thinking about like who's equipped to apply for this and manage reporting afterwards and stuff like that. Like, is the CISA, do they have a grant writer? Do they have a grants accountant and the people who can handle this much better than the schools? Or is your school strong in that your principal's really cooperative and totally on board, and maybe some of the other schools could drag you down. So I also like I'm always cautious um, about getting like too big because it's more and more to wrangle if you don't have a good cooperative coalition. That said, there is a definite emphasis in this particular opportunity for coalitions and cooperation, and it is always strong. But just make sure that you're also thinking about your own workload and who's going to be able to handle this the best.
Some great points there. And I'll add that we also have another session following this one on the digital navigators, but also on coalitions following that. So you want to stay tuned if you're interested in that subject matter. Any final questions from the group before we maybe take it to break? I think we have time for possibly one more question. If not, I may ask my own question of the group. So yeah, I'm just sort of curious as to Doris, Sarah, Charles, how did you guys how did you guys end up in this line of work? What sort of spoke to you about grant writing or about these types of initiatives? Just sort of wrap things up for us.
I can start. I actually first started doing grant writing, covering someone else's maternity leave, and found that I was really good at it and loved it. And it's very like, I'm good with deadlines. I'm good with details. You give me the instructions, I will follow them. But there's still some room for creativity and writing and building some relationships. So I kind of felt like, oh wow, like I really found where I can use my strengths to help my community.
Sarah, Charles, thanks,
I
Doris.
can go
Great answer.
next. Mine's actually kind of comical. I came with 15 years of operations management behind me, and COVID hit, and I got laid off because I was the second highest paid in the company, and I found a job close to home. I applied for a part-time front desk receptionist position because I didn't want any stress. I wanted zero stress and commitment. I just wanted to answer the phone and say hi to people. And I lasted about 3 weeks, and it was right at the beginning of the CARES grant. And they looked at me and they said, "Hey, you got to help us out, organizational." And I caught the hook on the grant, on the CARES grant, and I fell in love with the fast-paced environment and helping people and doing it. And the rest is history. I loved it. So that's my story.
Yeah, and I'll just close this out with, I kind of fell into nonprofit work. I was working for Liberty Mutual, a large organization, and through my network, met the CEO of Human IT, and I started to do some volunteer work for them and started going to the warehouse in Los Angeles and fell in love with the work, fell in love with the people there. And I actually started as our director of operations because my background is really in kind of like lean management and lean consulting. And I never really was much of a networker or anything like that. However, as time has progressed, I find myself doing more and more networking, more and more speaking engagements like this, and have kind of naturally just started putting together partnerships. And I think where I've gravitated to grants and grant writing is I was always pretty good at school, getting those A's when there was a project that was put out there, and I feel like grants are somewhat similar. Sometimes even the scoring's exactly out of 100, so it's very reminiscent of that. And I want to echo what Sarah said as far as like it can be very fast paced, like you're doing the grant, and then there's a nice reprieve after, and you're kind of maybe waiting for the next one if you've got that pleasure. So yeah, thanks all.
Really great answers. Yeah, you really spoke to the phenomena that I've witnessed in past roles. I used to work for Catholic Relief Services, writing grants for the federal government, and then later for the State Department. Yeah, there is a certain element of, the creativity process, but also the grant writing role specifically does sort of tend to attract those who are slightly adrenaline junkies, right? So thanks so much. This has been a very rich discussion. I think we're at just about exactly 45 minutes, which is what we planned for. Unless there's any final questions from the group, I think we're going to take it to break.